Hello everyone, thank you very much for joining us today. I'm Emma Dunstone, I'm the VP of Marketing at Showpad. For those of you who don't know us very well, we're a sales enablement platform that guides sales reps to revenue through an asset management system for sales and marketing that leverages contextual content, engagement and analytics to help sales reps hold better conversations and ultimately close more business. Today, I'm really delighted to welcome Tamara Schenk. She's the Research Director at MHI Global, and Showpad recently worked with CSO Insights, which is part of MHI Global, on a major research project, which was designed to understand how sales enablement is evolving in over 300 companies globally today. The results were surprising in places, but ultimately they show that effective sales enablement is key to the success for sales teams today, and that it's going to become more important as we move through the next 12 months. I'm going to hand over to Tamara now to walk us through some of the key points of the research, and we'll share the full research with you after the session. Tamara, thanks ever so much for joining us. Over to you.
Thank you, Emma. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to me to present the highlights of the Sales Enablement Optimization study to you. So we start with a big number. So one of the most annoying questions enablement managers and enablement leaders are facing is, what is actually your business impact? And for a long time, it was hard to answer this question. So we asked this question to participants of our survey, and it's interesting because those participants said we don't have an enablement function, have a different revenue plan attainment than those who said we have an enablement function. The difference here is 8.2%. Just look at the difference between 80.3 and 88.5% in revenue plan attainment. So that's just the impact of having an enablement function, yes or no, but it can be even better. Because if you have an enablement function, the question is how well do you execute on a customer core strategy? So we have seen, and we will look in more details on that, that being aligned to the customer's journey is one of the central themes for impactful, for successful sales enablement. And we have seen an even more interesting number here, because the difference between those organizations is that actually we are not or only minimally aligned with our sales process to the customer's journey, compared to those who said we are mostly or fully aligned with the customer's journey. But there is another big difference. It's 9.1% is the difference in revenue plan attainment. So just take the rough numbers, the 8% and the 9%, and just look at what it means if you are running 100 million in revenues. So 8 or 9%, that's a remarkable number if you have 108 or 109 million instead. Worth to invest in sales enablement. So hello and welcome. Also from my side here, this is the agenda. What are we going to do during this webinar with you? We would like to build a case for a strategic enablement function and why this is important to take a more holistic, dynamic, and strategic approach. Then we will have a look at the study highlights. First, we will look at how enablement is set up across the globe, and then we will more focus on how effective is enablement currently, and then we will together create a going forward chapter for you, how to help you to define your right next steps to evolve your enablement practice in your organization. In sales enablement, as in sales, simply important to keep the main thing, and that is the customer. And with a customer, it is the customer's journey. It's important for us to align everything we're doing and how customers approach challenges and problems, how they want to make buying decisions, and also how they want to implement and use our products, solutions, and services. And with that, we also have to focus on all the related customer and buyer roles throughout the entire customer's journey. What does that mean specifically? We're also doing a lot of research on high-performing sales professionals and, so to say, the rest of the world. And what's always separating the wheat from the chaff is how well sales professionals are able to adapt to changing buyer behaviors. And that they can do that, sales enablement has a major role to help them to achieve that. If you just look at a very generic customer's journey, of course, you have to adjust that to your industry, to your business, to your business model. But you always have these three big phases. There is an awareness phase where customers make a decision. Do we need to change in the first place? How do we want to approach this? What are our business goals? Do we change, yes or no, for a better future state? Then there is a buying phase with a buying decision, and there is an implementation and adoption phase. And we should not stop after a buying decision has been made, because for customers, this is just one milestone into their most important phase, and that's implementation and adoption. So back to sales professionals. What is the world-class ability they should be able to show here, and what is the value they create along the customer's journey for the different buyer roles? And that is in the very early phases, is to navigate their change dynamics, to help a buying team to understand what's the business impact of the problem, to provide them valuable business perspectives, and of course to put that into their specific context. In the buying phase, it's all about navigating decision dynamics. It's much more product focused. It's much more competitive in this area, as we all know. And then in the implementation and adoption phase, it's about navigating the different value dynamics. Different stakeholders will perceive value in a different way. Here it's just important not to walk away, but to own the outcome and to make sure that the value that has been sold gets delivered, and also that the value messages get communicated to the initial stakeholders. So buyers are, of course, as we know, much more informed than ever. And salespeople should also be much more informed than ever. But we all know that this is not always the case, because more information can also lead to more confusion. We are still confused, but on a higher level. Why is that so? Because there's a lot of content information out there, but very often context is missing. And this is exactly the value sales professionals bring to the game here. It's to provide context for a buyer team, for a buyer role in the customer specific context. And that's the new selling, creating value at each phase of the customer's journey. What does that mean for enablement? It means a lot of things. It means enablement has to evolve from a tactical program or function to a more strategic discipline. It also has to focus not only on salespeople, but also to integrate frontline sales managers. It's not our specific topic today, but frontline sales managers are the most important role for salespeople. And if they coach and how they coach, that has a lot of impact on salespeople's performance as well. So in a more strategic enablement discipline, we would try to focus on frontline sales managers as well, and to integrate a coaching approach, and that's also connected to the enablement framework. Then it's also important not only to look at sales and marketing alignment issues, but to change the perspective and to look at this issue from the customer's journey. It's not so much about aligning sales and marketing to each other. It's the more important question is, how well do we align marketing and sales responsibilities along the entire customer's journey? And then it's to walk away from isolated initiatives, from point solutions, and to come to holistic and integrated approach. In a nutshell, it's evolving sales enablement from fixing a quarter to driving sustainable sales results in a more strategic approach. What's very important for me here is that there is nothing wrong with what's here written on the left-hand side. We all have started this way. I did it the same way in my previous role, when I had the pleasure to evolve enablement from idea to a program to a function to a strategic function at T-Systems before I became an analyst. And it's a natural thing whenever you start something new, you start to fix the biggest pain point. This is where you get attention, where you get buy-in, where you get budget for, and of course that will lead to a point solution in the first place, to focus on salespeople only. But then the question is, how do we evolve enablement as a discipline to create more business impact? And to create more business impact, and we have seen the numbers on revenue plan attainment, this is what we need to do to have a more strategic approach to follow a customer core strategy. And that brings us directly to the next chapter to have a look at the study highlights on how enablement is set up based on our 2015 Sales Enablement Optimization Study. Before we do that, I would like to show you a few information about the demographics of the study. So when we have taken the data to create the report in mid of October, we were at 405 with the number of participants. And it's important, this is a global study. So we have almost 60% of the participants in North America. There is a huge participation in EMEA, and in all the other regions of the world are represented. We have also a good combination of smaller companies, of bigger companies, and also the average deal size shows that we have many different products and service models included in this survey. User communities. What are the user communities you have to create services for as enablement program or function? That was one of our first questions in the survey. And as a no surprise, the salespeople and account managers are by far the most important user group. But interesting, what we were always seeing for a while is that frontline sales managers become more and more relevant in enablement. What was a bit of a surprise for us is that channel personnel was only ranked with 25 to 3% in this survey. Maybe one of the reasons could be that channel enablement very often happens in the channel business units and in different functions, not necessarily in an enablement function or not necessarily in the same function. The challenge for serving so many user groups is, of course, to find a balance between what can be reused and what has to be tailored specifically. Then we wanted to know what are the enablement goals of your enablement program, of your enablement function. And as you see, there are a lot of different enablement goals enablement managers and leaders are facing. So let's not get confused with the complexity of this chart. Let's just sort it out a little bit. So number one is increase in sales efficiency. It is by far the most important goal. And then it is followed by growth and performance goals. So increase in revenues, increase in new account acquisition, these are growth goals. And then we have a performance goal to increase win rates of forecast deals here. And these are the principles all these goals work by. They are growth, performance goals, and efficiency goals. So it is important to know that nobody has to tackle all these goals at the same time. This is, of course, the overview of all participants. What enablement goals are relevant for an enablement function at a certain time depends a lot on the context of the organization, on the current enablement challenges, and of course on the maturity level. And I'm just beginning with enablement to organize my content domain, to implement technology, that I can provide a perfect access for my salespeople to get to the right content at the right time. Efficiency goals are of course the most important thing in the first place. Then the more I evolve enablement to a more strategic function that looks at more sales performance, and I will get other goals in my agenda. So then we also wanted to understand how our priorities set in enablement, and that was really a surprise for us, because what we learned here is that more than 50% of the participants reported to work on an informal or on a one-off project manner. And so in our opinion, if we have to balance so many different goals in enablement, even if not all at the same time, we should probably have a more structured and a more strategic approach to how priorities are set. So there is definitely some room for improvement here. Then we also wanted to know from the participants, what are the services you are offering for the different user groups? What are the enablement services? And for some of the audience, there might be a surprise that sales training services were ranked at the most important enablement service, followed by sales process improvement tools and so on, and content services, or something with a 51.5%, and also coaching services are already included here. So important here is to bring that into context, is that content is the foundation for almost every single service here on this chart. So there is no training without content. There is no sales process improvement without content. And there is no onboarding without content. There is also no coaching without content. So even if content itself as a standalone service is ranked in the middle here, sales content, if that's internal or customer-facing content, plays a very big role in enablement. So here, of course, the challenge is how to derive specific goals depending on context, maturity, and specific business challenges for all these services. So then we should get to the next chart. Here we are. Then, of course, I'm sure many of you have already waited for this one. Where is sales enablement in the organization? And of course, and I have the same opinion, the question was always, is sales enablement in sales or is it in marketing? And you know that there are very strong opinions on both sides. So the data says it clearly that enablement is in sales. So what we learned here is that more than 50% report to executive sales management and another 25% to sales operations, followed by marketing, product and portfolio management, training, HR, and interestingly 10% others. So also here it's important to bring that into context. So what we see in the market is that when enablement functions are created now, they are very often put within sales, but with a different focus, with a different approach. They take more and more on an orchestrating role. That means they orchestrate content and training and maybe also coaching services along the customer's journey for salespeople and for frontline sales managers. But that does not mean that all the others have nothing to do with it. The opposite is the case. So if they take an orchestrating role, so collaboration is a very important issue. And of course, for marketing, for product and portfolio management, there's a lot of work to do in enablement, but under the umbrella of a more strategic enablement approach. And then a follow-up question was, what are the functions you are collaborating with as sales enablement? And
Tamara,
that's just,
Tamara,
yes.
That slide that you've just shown is really interesting in the low number of marketing where sales enablement sits. Is that a surprise to you?
Yeah, definitely this is a surprise. On the one hand side, we see the trend that more and more of the new functions are set up in sales, but the low number of marketing was a surprise, definitely. So even if you take some of the demographics, it doesn't reduce the trends. I mean, the trend is pretty clear. It's very strong in the data, even if we consider some of the demographic factors. And as I said, the more strategic the role becomes, it becomes more an orchestrating role. So it doesn't mean that marketing is out of the game. I think the opposite is the case. There is more and more to do, but in a better orchestrated way along the customer's journey, not so much in a functional view, but in a more collaborative view, depending on the customer's journey.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Well, welcome. So then let's continue to deepen this discussion on the collaboration. So what are the areas, the functional areas you have to collaborate with as enablement? And also here we see the same trend. So there seems to be a lot of collaboration need within sales. So sales management and sales operations were ranked here on number 1 and number 2. And then we have product marketing, training, learning, and development. That's no surprise, as training is a key service as well, followed by product management and lead management. So you can never do it the right way. So there are organizations that have product marketing and product management together. Lead management is, of course, a huge part of the marketing function, but this is also the key when it comes to sales and marketing alignment, how to define this interface. But if we just take these 3 areas together, then also you see that there is a lot of relevance in collaborating with marketing with the product part of the house. I think that supports actually what we just discussed on where is sales enablement and why is there a low marketing number. And interesting for us was also, because we had a follow-up question on that one, we asked the participants, how do you collaborate? If there is such a huge collaboration, it's how do you collaborate? And that was really another big surprise, because more than 80% said we collaborate on an informal basis or a talk basis only. And I mean, there is a huge efficiency potential if you just get the collaboration part right of such a broad enablement function as we see it here. And this is also where leadership comes in, because very often collaboration barriers have to be removed first in terms of budget and competing targets and things like that. And if that's defined and there's a conceptual foundation established, then technology can create a huge value and can create huge impact to get the collaboration up and running in a very efficient way. So what we've seen so far is that enablement matters. It matters in terms of revenue numbers. So we've seen the 82% better revenue plan attainment if you have an enablement function, yes or no. And enablement, if you have an enablement function and you follow a customer core approach, it's -1% better revenue plan attainment. So I don't think there is any sales leader who would not leverage these numbers in his or her sales organization. Then we've also seen that enablement is a very multifaceted discipline. There are various goals and priorities, multiple enablement services, multiple user groups, including sales managers, and all that needs a lot of balance, a lot of navigation efforts, and a lot of collaboration. We've also seen that enablement is not a synonym for sales and marketing alignment, that there is a strong trend enablement to taking on a more orchestrating role and being allocated in sales. And if we look at the different goals and the different priorities, we've seen that creates a round picture, so to say. Seeing collaboration needs, cross-functional collaboration needs, and there is a huge potential to make that much more efficient. Do we have any questions right now? Or should we continue?
Yep, go ahead, please, Tamara.
Okay, then we look at enablement effectiveness. So we wanted to see what is the central theme in the study that leads to enablement effectiveness, that helps us really to leverage the -1%. And we have seen that this central theme is called, how well is your sales process aligned to the customer's journey? Well, we've seen here that there is that organizations have done a lot of work on getting much better aligned to the customer's journey. We see here 54% say we're mostly aligned, 90% say we're fully aligned, and another 22 and 5% have apparently some work to do in this area. So organizations have done a lot of work to align their process landscapes to the customer's journey, and for very good reasons, because they are very hard sales performance metrics that make it really mandatory to work on the customer journey alignment. Conversion rates can be improved up to 38%. Quota attainment can be improved up to 13%, and overall revenue plan attainment, as we have seen, by 9 to 2%. So as Emma said in the beginning, so you will get the full study results and can see the details on these numbers. As an example on how effective enablement services are, we have looked at content services. And we have taken the example of internal content services. That means playbooks, objection handling guidelines, also account plans, messaging guidelines, fact sheets or cheat sheets, however you call it. What you provide for your salespeople that they can prepare their conversation, their interaction. So don't get confused with the picture here. When we ask people to rank that, we ask them to rank that between needs major redesign, needs improvement, meets expectations, or exceeds expectations. And we have sorted the chart by needs major redesign and improvement. And so if you just look at the top part of the chart, so you see your playbooks, relationship maps, competitive comparing, things like that, they are ranked not very effective. But these are also services you have to design from a customer journey, from a buyer role perspective, also guided selling scripts. And on the bottom of the chart, you see fact sheets, product information, internal product overviews. They are ranked much more effective. So while there is definitely some kind of comfort zone, because these are all things we know for decades, and to design all these things from a customer perspective is comparably new. So organizations seem to have a challenge to translate all the wisdom from the customer journey alignment in effective enablement services. So it seems to be a challenge where organizations need some help to become even more effective in this area. So we have taken one example on how to improve sales performance metrics, and that's the impact of guided selling scripts on win rates. As you can see here in this chart, so your win rates are really impacted by effective guided selling scripts. So those guided selling scripts who were ranked with exceed expectations or meet expectations have a much bigger impact on the win rate than compared to selling scripts that were ranked with need improvements or major redesign. So having it was, of course, the key criteria here, and it seems to be a bit indifferent regarding losses and no decisions. Also here, the challenge is how to create a really effective customer core guided selling script. And this is just an example. Of course, we've seen on the chart before, playbooks very often seen as a silver bullet for sales performance show that there is a need for redesign and improvements. So then we continue on the next chart and we look at another category. We look at customer-facing content. So it is everything customers see from your organizations on the website. It is your blog, it is a case study, it's a reference, it's a white paper, it's an information, it's a video you present to your audience, to everybody who visits your website. And here it's very important that customer-facing content, of course, that can also be shared from salespeople with prospects and customers. It's all the same category, everything that goes to the customer. What we've seen here is that only content that exceeds expectations in terms of effectiveness will lead you to a position that you can develop a strategic contributor or a strategic partnership with your customers. And on the other hand, if you look at the right-hand side of the chart, if you have client-facing content that needs major redesign or needs improvement, you are not able to achieve a trusted partner, a trusted advisor, strategic partner relationship level with your customer. I think that's very impressive, and it really shows that content is not a marketing issue, it's not an enablement issue only. This is a company strategic imperative. So also here, sales enablement and getting the content right and providing the content the right way is a strategic imperative. So then we wanted also to know from our participants, what are the improvements you're looking for when you implement enablement technology? And interesting here is that a lot of these improvements have to do with efficiency, improving rep access to sales content, sharing best practices, improving cross-selling and upselling. And then there are also some of the effectiveness goals included here, reducing no decisions and reducing competitive losses, just as a few examples that go in the effectiveness direction. So the trend is, of course, build access, sharing, driving cross and upselling. These are the key improvements participants are looking for when they implement enablement content technology. What's interesting is that people seems to have a challenge with using the tracking abilities. They're currently not on the top of the improvements list. This is also a challenge for many organizations to leverage technology the right way to create a shift from efficiency only to effectiveness. And Emma will show us more on how to do that the right way in a few minutes. So then let's look at how you could go forward with your enablement practice, with how to evolve your enablement practice to the next level. I will quickly walk you through an enablement maturity model we have created, and we distinguish means 3 levels. The required level, which is what we call sales enablement. This is all about organizing a certain domain, organizing the content domain, organizing the training domain, managing that and make that better, make that more efficient, and enable the sales force to have instant access to all these tools. If we come to sales force enablement, that's what we call the recommended level. We look at a customer core strategy. We want to design our enablement service here with a customer journey as a main design point. We begin to integrate content and training services. We begin to integrate frontline sales managers or targeters. We think about first coaching approaches and how to integrate them with their coaching approaches to drive adoption and reinforcement. And we also think in terms of technology about integration, walking away from standalone enablement solutions to integrate them in CRM systems. And then, of course, we all need ambition. So we have created a world-class level, which is what we call a customer core enablement, a completely adaptive approach. So this is really when we change perspective to not thinking about how do we align our sales process to the customer's journey. The question here would be the other way around. Here is the customer's journey. What actually do we need of that internally? But this is not only in 5 years, it's probably in 10 years. We need ambitions and visions. So now let's focus on how you could evolve your enablement practice. So we talked a lot about these two perspectives, the customer's journey on the one hand side and your internal process landscape, marketing and sales and service on the other hand side. And for me, a great analogy to do that is to learn that from the Tower Bridge in London. Because if you put yourself on one of these towers, you will see that the perspective is slightly different. How you look in the world, the perspective is different if you stand on the right-hand side or on the left-hand side of the Tower Bridge towers. So coming from the bridge, the bridge leads directly to our master framework, to our enablement master framework. So one tower is the customer's journey. The other tower is the internal process landscape from marketing, sales to service. And there are basically 4 areas to focus on if you want to evolve your enablement discipline. The first one is, and that's addressing not having a clear vision and not having a strong strategic way how to set priorities. It is creating a vision and strategy charter for enablement. It's always a surprise for us how often this is not existing. That means to work backwards from the sales strategy, to map it to sales execution, to identify gaps and weaknesses and strengths, and to define your specific enablement scope, and to derive your objectives, how to come to the vision, to put that on a roadmap. This is a sales enablement leader's internal selling tool, so really important to have that. Then there's another area, how do we design and create enablement services, content services, training, coaching services along the customer's journey? How do we make that very effective? And then there is an area not so many people are talking about. I call that a dark side of enablement. It is enablement operations. And this is pretty much about how does our production process look like, from defining, creating, localization, to how do we provide the enablement service, and how do we track and measure success. This is enablement operation. Collaboration model fits also into this third area. Then, of course, it comes to change and adoption. And here, frontline sales managers are a key element to drive adoption and reinforcement. The framework also helps to balance between leadership and technology, always based on cross-functional collaboration. So also here, there's a research note available and a lot of content, research content for each of these different areas. So please come back to us if you want to learn more about that. So let's quickly summarize what we learned so far. So we have seen that enablement creates business impact. 82% was the number between having an enablement function, not having an enablement function. If you have an enablement function, 82% better revenue plan attainment. If you have an enablement function and you do it the right way, which means you follow a customer core strategy, you can have 9.1% better revenue plan attainment. Sales enablement belongs to sales. 77.8% report into sales is a trend we're seeing, but it does not mean that marketing and product has nothing to do with that. It means more that enablement becomes more strategic and an orchestrating role in sales, overseeing all these different services and assets in different functions. We've also seen that the critical success factor and the foundation for high performance is to be very well aligned with the internal process landscape to the customer's journey. The challenge still is how to translate this customer journey knowledge into effective enablement services. And last but not least, we wanted to show you a few ideas how, first of all, how to determine your current point of departure. Where are you currently in your enablement maturity? And then to leverage some ideas of the master framework. So what could be a right next step to evolve your enablement discipline in your organization to the next level? And that will be different in every organization, and that's totally fine. It's only important to know the point of departure and the vision where to go, and then to define the steps how to get there. Yeah. For those of you who don't know a lot about CSO Insights, please visit us on our website at csoinsights.com. You can find 3 new blog posts every week. The blog is free. The blog is accessible for everybody. You can also become a research member. There are several options for digital research memberships or advisory services. We're happy to help you with that. And yeah, now we are coming to Emma's part, who creates some context for you what technology can do for you in this area.
Thank you, Tamara. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I hear you perfectly.
Excellent. So that was some really incredibly insightful research. I'm just going to check that I can use the slides. So there are a lot of areas here as to where companies can improve, and there have been some questions coming through, so we'll address those at the end, so keep your thinking cap on. I just wanted to take a few moments just to talk through some of the key takeaways that I heard and what we see with some of our Showpad customers, and therefore what might be potential next steps for an organization. 1 second, my slide. Okay, so we heard 6 key takeaways, and enablement is has very many different areas, liaises with many different parts of the organization. And whilst it may still be caretaken by marketing in your particular organization, that trend has shifted, and for various reasons it does need to roll into sales. Mostly because then it's more in tune with the sales team's challenges, the needs, the current conversations they're having, and is more able to prioritize the requirements. But it doesn't live alone. It absolutely needs to work with all areas of the organization. I thought the chart that you pulled up that showed the different collaboration pieces was absolutely fascinating, and the level of collaboration that sales enablement has with each of those team areas. That's operations, marketing, product marketing, training, and all sorts. I mean, that's one of the key, truly central roles of an organization. It must ensure that sales teams are aligned with the buyer's journey. By virtue of this team being in lockstep with those who buy your products, then that will ensure that the sales processes are also aligned with what the buyer needs and when that buyer needs it. And of course, all the people and the processes in the world won't scale seamlessly. You need to ensure that you're underpinned by the technology that's going to enable your sales teams to do their job more efficiently and effectively, and in line with your sales process and the buyer's needs. Finally, this is kind of always my favorite piece, don't forget to set success metrics and make sure that they're tracked and checked in on. Be that how sales are leveraging enablement tools such as Showpad, or utilizing sales tools such as content from marketing, or how they're engaging with their customers, how their customers are engaging with them, and ultimately, how many sales are reaching quota, exceeding quota, and the organization's revenue goals. So there are some really key takeaways there to focus on, because there was such a lot in that presentation that I think narrowing it down to kind of 6 key areas and where to focus is a good starting point. Showpad is a sales enablement tool. Here are some of the ways that we help enable sales teams to drive relevant, impactful conversations with their customers. We enable marketing to provide the right content to sales and for sales to use it in where they need to have those conversations with their customers. Be that an online meeting or a face-to-face meeting or just casually meeting on an exhibition booth or in a social environment. That content needs to be able to be found and needs to be able to be used and needs to be tailored and delivered that's relevant to the conversation that's being had at that time. So, for example, if it's at a certain stage of the buy cycle, later, present information on pricing, on ROI calculators, how you need to close. If you are talking to a certain persona, so if you are talking to a doctor or to a CIO, how do you actually very easily get to the right content that you need that's going to be relevant for them and contain the key messages for them? And of course, so Showpad helps marketing get the right content to sales, sales to then use that in their conversations, and to share the relevant content with their prospects after the conversation has ended. And it's all wrapped up in some deep analytics that means that sales can see how their prospects are engaging with their digital leave behind content, as it were, after they have left the room, and understand how engaged that prospect is and whether they may need to do some more work. And marketing can see what content is actually being used, right down to the slide level. So, as marketers, we're able to create more content that's being used and is working. We're able to stop creating content that isn't used and save our budget and put it into more relevant content. So the analytics piece is really, really important from that. The next piece, there was a couple of pieces of content that came out of the research that talked about the customer-facing content and tools that your respondents felt needed to be improved. They included ROI calculators was the top scoring piece in terms of how do we actually help prove the value and why you need these types of solutions. How do we help produce ROI justification templates and responses that are very tailored to an organization? How do we put our hands easily on relevant customer case studies? How do we make sure that the white papers that we pull up are exactly the right piece in the conversation and the use case that we're talking about with our customer? So it was really interesting that this content needs improvement, and to get improved content needs that insight into how it's being used and how a customer is engaging. What I particularly liked was the area of the report that showed the improvements that result from successful deployment of sales enablement. What is it that when you put a tool in place you are expecting to benefit? Tracking abilities were lower, but what was quite interesting is that being able to have that overview piece allows you to get more relevant content, which meant that the content helps to shorten sales cycles. If you can find content immediately, you can reduce the time taken for a sales rep to learn what's available, learn what they need to find, and then present that to their customers. And ultimately, it helps align sales and marketing so that marketing can provide more of what's needed. And obviously, we talked a lot about access to sales content and tools and make that available where your sales rep is, when your sales rep needs it, and tailored specifically to the conversation that they're having. There was a lot of companies that felt that they needed improvement when it comes to tracking. And so, I'm going to go through quickly so that we can get to the questions. But again, these are in the report, and I encourage you all to look at the key areas, not try and bite off everything at once, but to see some of the key areas that you are able to tackle first in the field of sales enablement. So, just to finalize, just before tomorrow I put you back on the spot with some questions, We absolutely help equip your sales team with the right content. We ensure that that messaging is unified and the communication is tailored throughout the buyer's journey. We help you analyze how your sales reps are interacting with the content that marketing, enablement teams are creating, training content that they're producing. We allow you to use these insights to optimize your content so that your sales teams can have better sales conversations. And we give you a holistic view of the entire prospect's journey through their interactions with your sales teams to allow you to understand and implement best practices or better coaching and training, whatever you need to make your sales teams more effective. So, Tamara, if you are up for a few more questions, a couple of ones have come in. So, since the biggest amount of sales enablement functions are in the sales function, what do you think are key skills for successful sales enablement managers?
That's a great question. And in my experience, and I don't have data points on that, but in my own experience, it is the ability to orchestrate a lot of different things at the same time and to collaborate with many different functions at the same time. So for instance, how to get aligned with product training or with HR, because if such a function evolves within sales, it ultimately means that you take something away from another function. So if that's, you can do something with budgets from HR, so that's great, and both benefit from that. They get exposed and you can do something useful with that. But very often, just think about aligning sales content and product training to make sure that the messages are consistent. And especially in big corporations, you will find a situation that they use different content for product trainings, and some people complain, I don't want to become a better product manager, I want to sell these services. So there's a lot of alignment to be done, and it also means to remove redundancies. It is not always easy conversations to have. Actually a lot of leadership skills and the ability to think from another perspective, to put issues in the other role, and to align these different perspectives and to collaborate successfully.
Okay.
I think that's a key issue here.
Okay. So with all the different improvements that can be made, what do you see as the real quick wins that we can get out of sales enablement? And what are the more longer term results to focus on?
I think the quick win depends on an organization's current situation. So if an organization is currently focused on content management, implementing technology, and you just see the results, okay, there are some content types that need improvement, I would just take one that's really relevant in your organization and work backwards from the customer's journey and improve that. And it's very important, listen to the salespeople and listen to frontline sales managers, take their feedback before you redesign whatever it is. If that's a playbook or a guided selling script, whatever important for your salespeople, just take one of these content types and work on that. And the longer term things then would be, okay, let's take the 2 days and make this vision and strategy workshop and get this charter right. And then let's really think about, okay, probably we need to improve our own enablement processes to get more efficient and to enable effectiveness, what we ultimately want to achieve, sales effectiveness, and to work in this direction. These are more longer term issues then.
Okay. I have a question for me that's just come in actually. So is the ShowPad solution purely a content management system for sales related content? How well does it integrate with CRM systems? So that's a great question, and we see this as effectively a tool that needs to integrate with your systems. So we integrate with Salesforce.com, and we allow you to track meetings within the ShowPad solution that are then tracked and recorded in Salesforce. So rather than requiring your sales rep to go back to the office and record that they had a meeting, already automatically ShowPad can track that this meeting has started that these specific areas of content were discussed and viewed during that meeting, and then report that into Salesforce. And it can also track what content was shared with that prospect after the meeting and pull that into Salesforce too. So it really gives you that overall view of the customer and what's happening in those meetings without putting any extra weight on the sales rep or requirement on the sales rep to actually record that meeting. So
that's an excellent ability. And then in this case, I would also take the frontline sales managers into this discussion and show them how they can work with all the analytics that come out of such a system. Because currently we have more analytics from system than we use in an effective way. And I think the sales managers play an important role when it comes how to use that effectively directly in the next coaching session.
Great. I think we have probably time for one more question. This has come in and says, how do you view sales leads process and sales enablement ownership? Does it make sense to have that lead process live in a sales enablement role or in another area of the organization?
That's an interesting question. In my opinion, the process ownership should probably be in marketing or in sales. I don't know a lot of functions enablement who own the process, the lead process itself. But if that's the case, I would always try to work then backwards from the customer's journey and to walk away from this as a marketing and this is a sales lead and just think how mature is this lead along the customer's journey. That's probably the more important than the ownership.
Okay, all right. And my last question to you actually is, what was the biggest surprise to you in the whole of the research project?
The biggest surprise was that 82% said we collaborate informal or ad hoc only, because this is a function that lives from cross-functional collaboration, and that is really not very structured and organized. Then followed by the 71% in marketing.
Good. All right. Very interesting. Cool. Okay. Well, everybody, thank you ever so much for attending. We will ensure that you get a copy of the recording and of the full research report. If you are interested in Showpad, please do head to showpad.com. We have a free trial that you are able to download. Or if you have any further questions, please feel free to email me or send a message to us via our website. My email address is emma.dunstone@showpad.com. It's emma.dunstone, DUNSTONE, @showpad.com. And again, I really appreciate your time this morning, this afternoon, wherever you are, and thank you very much.